If you have a bank account and you only spend the interest on that bank account and never go above it, you're always going to have the principal. And it's the same in the forest. If you spend the interest, which is your annual growth rate, if you spend the interest, you always have the forest. So that, in a nutshell, is what I've done on Wildwood, and that is why it has so much timber on it today.
But the government of British Columbia didn't see it that way, not when they first began setting forest management policy. The plan then was to cut down all the old-growth forest and plant a new one in its place. The grand old-growth forests were regarded as a sort of one-time bonus to the economy of British Columbia. To use Merve's analogy, the government's plan was to spend all the principal in the bank and then try to open a second account. That was the thinking in 1945. So as Merve embarked on his career as a selective logger, the forest industry was headed in a very different direction. Worldwide demand for Canadian lumber was on the rise, and little towns sprung up around the sawmills and the pulp and paper mills. Spending the principal might have seemed to make sense then. Environmentalists say it doesn't anymore.
Implicit in our forest policy is a system whereby we get rid of the old growth and we log at a higher rate today, and tomorrow, when we're logging second growth, we're actually logging a lot less. And government has known about this policy for quite some time. That's why we have allowable annual cut levels today that are at 70 million cubic meters, and by the government's own calculations, the long-run sustainable yield is somewhere down around 59.
Ben Parfitt is a writer and forest industry watchdog. A reporter with the Vancouver Sun for several years, he was one of the authors of the book Forestopia, considered by many, if not by the logging industry, to be the definitive study of the problems facing BC's forests.
What we've seen over the course of the last few decades in the province is a steady climb in logging rates, a climb that really reached a peak in the late 80s when about 90 million cubic meters of wood was coming out of the forest every year. And what companies were doing throughout the 70s and 80s was finding new ways to basically put people out of work by investing in machinery both in their mills and machinery in the forests that would allow them to take out more trees with fewer and fewer people. The end result was that we ended up with a very quote-unquote efficient industry, an industry that was capable of producing millions and millions and millions of board feet of commodity lumber and tons and tons and tons of commodity pulp.